Greetings, greetings. This is Dr. Jonathan Ellerby, and I'm very grateful you joined me today for this provocative and hopefully helpful live recorded 12 at 12. So the 12 at 12 is unscripted. It's every weekday at 12 noon. That's Mountain Time in Denver, Colorado, United States. But you're welcome to join from anywhere and everywhere. I hope you subscribe because as my subscribers grow, I get to use more fancy tools for editing, and it makes the whole thing better for all of us. Let's take a breath and get into today's topic right away. All right, closing your eyes, I'm going to invite you to breathe in as deeply as you can and then hold it as long as you can. When you exhale, you're going to exhale as long as you can. When you get into that exhale, really extend the exhale so that it is absolutely complete until your stomach muscles contract, and then you take a nice refreshing breath in. Feel it moving down towards your belly. Hold it just a moment this time, and then consciously breathing out, long, slowly, extending that breath as far as you can, and then again, one last time, a refreshing, gentle inhale. Imagine you're drawing life force, you're drawing in breath that will energize you and yet reconnect you with a sense of calm. And then you're exhaling as far as you can, as though you were releasing every and all the stress and distress of your life. All right, so the topic today, conspiracy theories. Now, here's the funny thing about this topic. You may actually be involved with something that's called a conspiracy theory. And of course, to you, it's not a conspiracy. So I want to acknowledge right off the bat that one person's conspiracy theory is another person's reality. And I'm not here really to tell you who's right and who's wrong, but I'd like to give you a spiritual perspective, a oneness perspective, which is sort of the foundation of all the work that I do, that might help you to make sense of the proliferation of conspiracy theories right now in the middle of summer 2020, and also a little bit about the Great Awakening, which is one of the conspiracy theories, or whatever you want to call it, awakening theories that is most popular today. So, to talk about this, I actually am reminded of a story of when I was in India. And I was in McLeod, often known as Dharamsala. I was fortunate to be welcomed to study in the Dalai Lama's temple, where I spent a month going every morning at sunrise, and I would sit for hours. It's kind of a long, crazy story. But I spent the rest of the day doing other things. I was studying energy healing, and a lot of my life until that point had been shaped by time spent with indigenous people. Not workshops, but actually on reservations and in villages in Africa and so on. Also a long story. So, one day I was sitting at this community table in a vegetarian restaurant run by a couple of Jewish brothers. I mean, talk about a crazy story. You got a Canadian studying in the Dalai Lama's temple with a background in native culture and sitting in a Jewish deli in India. I mean, this is like a joke. You can't even make this stuff up. And sitting at my community table was a Western Buddhist monk, an Englishman, as a matter of fact. Well, to make a long story short, we got into this conversation in which at the beginning of the conversation, he understood that I was involved in these Buddhist practices and that I was very much a proponent of non-duality, which is the belief that ultimately everything is one thing. There are no two things. Now, in Eastern traditions, they usually characterize this non-duality as emptiness, that everything is empty of ultimate form. There is nothing ultimately but consciousness, energy. and spirit, or spirit, you could say. In the West, instead of being understood as sort of the negative, the absence of everything, it's often understood as the presence of everything, the idea that everything is united in one thing, which could be called God or spirit, again, consciousness or energy. Okay, so he was very happy with that part of the conversation. At the end of the conversation, I started to ask some people where I could find some kind of a cleansing herb, something for smudging, to use the smoke of the sacred plant to make a ceremony. Now, my father had died a year earlier, and I wanted to use one of the native traditions that I had been taught on my own privately to go off into the forest and make an offering in honor of the memorial of his death. Well, this guy was outraged. What are you talking about? He said. You just finished telling me that you believe in non-duality, the oneness of everything, but now you're like talking to spirits and making offering to spirits? Don't you know that they don't exist? How could you spend any time or energy on that? Well, I said, I understand that ultimately the spirit world is absorbed in the ultimate energy of our source, but in this human experience, I would describe them as relatively real. It's a phenomena that I experience, that millions of people experience. And just like, the home that I came from or the bus that I got here in, it may not have ultimate substance, but it has relative substance. I don't know if you're picking up what I'm putting down here, but stay with me. Well, this was frustrating for him. He couldn't handle it. Bottom line was, for this fellow, you either accepted that everything was nothing, everything is an illusion, or you're lost in illusion. I kind of think that reality is somewhere in between. Here's how it relates to conspiracy theories. The greatest capacity for inner peace, wholeness, and personal growth and fulfillment, in my experience, is to awaken to that non-duality, to awaken to the oneness of all things, to cultivate the ability to connect with that dimension of reality that transcends all separateness and difference. In other words, for me, to get into a lengthy debate about which theory about government is right or wrong, which theory about alien races is right or wrong, which theory about thought control and manipulation and all these secret plots, it's kind of not that important to me. Because the reality is, whatever's going on in this world is just a mere shadow of the ultimate oneness that we come from. Now, that puts me in the camp of the Buddhist monk, who is insistent that we must not pay attention to division and difference, because the ultimate truth transcends any conspiracy theory, any religion, any science, that ultimately we are a part of a unified field, as Einstein would call it, or an all-encompassing oneness, a divine or innate system, whatever you want to call it, that is essentially life itself. And that as we shed our conditional ideas, our conditional identity, we access a place in ourselves that is at one with, or you might say the same as, the infinite oneness that we come from. Now, having said that, in my experience, it makes all those theories kind of irrelevant. Now, are they meaningless? Do they have any value? Well, sure. Of course they do. The value that they have is twofold. One that I think is really worth considering, and one that I think is really worth being concerned about. The thing that you have to be concerned about is that conspiracy theories tend to blossom and thrive in times of fear and uncertainty. And most people don't like being fearful or feeling uncertain. And when someone offers them a story of how things are that makes them feel in control or privileged or as though they understand something that others don't, that can be very comforting. You might say that what Hitler used to build his evil empire was a conspiracy theory. The Jews are out to get us. Black people are out to get us. Gay people are out to get us. And look, if you see the positions they got themselves into society, if you see their behaviors, it'll all explain your suffering, your sorrow. Unite with me, and we will end this horrible, terrible secret society. And then, of course, they went on to kill millions and millions and millions of people. And it started with a very small group of people who had a kind of conspiracy theory that rallied people through their fear and uncertainty in a time of great social distress in Germany's history, with disastrous results. It's not a surprise to me that as we weather the changes of COVID, the influences of COVID, the economic ups and downs, the global tensions, and certainly in the United States, the extremes of political tension, that people would start to gravitate towards stories of life that would somehow give them something to focus on, something to feel hopeful about, something to feel privileged by, and that's concerning. It's concerning because it's fair to say, and this is the upside of conspiracy theories, that of course there are going to be stories behind the scenes in society, in politics, in science, in sports, in your family, that not everyone knows. And it is important to discern what is true, what is an incomplete story. And so to be curious about the big picture is really important. To challenge assumptions in the world is really important. The challenge, however, in those challenges is to do so in a way that remains curious, remains open, remains connected to a deeper, or you might call it higher, consciousness that really doesn't need to justify itself by the dualism or the judgment of any one group of people. I think it's fair to say that any time you hear a philosophy that pits one group against another, that claims to have all the truth or privileged information that only some people have, rather than feeling excited, you should probably feel cautious. So I encourage you to explore these kinds of theories. Ask yourself what feels right, but use intelligence, use science, use intuition, and ask yourself to question whether this is playing to some of your own fears or some of your worst characterizations of human nature. As social science have proved again and again and again, basic human nature is actually not as bad as we think. That despite all the horrors in history, and there have been countless horrors, slowly but steadily we always move towards greater inclusivity, greater justice, greater fairness. And there are already many countries in this world that have already reached a place where healthcare is thriving, education is thriving, quality of life is thriving, and there need not be any kind of divisive politic to make it happen. Where there is hatred, where there is againstness, where there is exclusivity, you must question the motive and the value. And ultimately, if there are no great takeaways or lessons, then return your focus to the source, to the center, the oneness from which we come, which ultimately transcends all these stories of life. It even transcends your story of life. From that quiet inner place of profound connection to all that is, we can surrender who and what we are, even our fear of those who would do things against us, and we would live fully from the natural soul, the natural spirit that arises within us. Our choices guided from a deeper intuition that is not about reactivity, but that is about profound listening to the essence of who and what we are, both as individuals and as a united, eternal consciousness. Well, there's a lot more to say on this topic, but we've gone over our time as always. Thank you for joining me. Please make sure you subscribe to this YouTube page. And if you'd like a free copy of my book, Spiritual Experience, no strings attached, you don't even have to give me your email. You can go to my website, jonathanellerby.com, click on the link that says send me the book, and that's my gift to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.